April 26, 1986, 1:23 in the morning. A Soviet reactor engineer named Leonid Toptunov hesitates for 10 seconds before pressing a button. In our timeline, he doesn't hesitate. The reactor explodes. The Soviet Union begins to die. But what if he had paused? What if Chernobyl never happened? You are about to enter a world where the USSR survived, the Cold War never ended, and the map of Europe looks nothing like the one you know. The actual disaster was caused by a flawed safety test, an unstable reactor design, and a chain of human errors stacked on top of each other. The fourth reactor at Chernobyl exploded with the force of around 500 Hiroshima bombs of radioactive fallout. 50,000 people in Pripyat were evacuated within 36 hours. They were told they would return in 3 days. They never did. Mikhail Gorbachev later said it openly. Chernobyl, more than anything else, was what destroyed the Soviet Union. The cleanup cost an estimated 18 billion rubles, which crippled an economy already collapsing under the weight of the Afghan war. Worse, it shattered the most important Soviet myth of all, the myth that the state could be trusted. Now rewind. In our new timeline, Toptunov pauses. The senior engineer, Alexander Akimov, refuses to override the safety interlocks. The test is aborted. Reactor 4 shuts down cleanly. By morning, the operators are reprimanded for missing their test window. By evening, they are forgotten. The world keeps spinning. The USSR keeps standing. Without Chernobyl, the 18 billion rubles stays in Moscow's budget. The Politburo's reform faction loses its strongest argument. Glasnost, the policy of openness, is quietly buried. Perestroika, the economic restructuring, is delayed by years. The Soviet Union limps into the 1990s wounded but intact. The Berlin Wall does not fall in 1989. There is no fall. Germany stays divided. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, all of them remain in the Warsaw Pact. NATO continues to arm Western Europe to the teeth. The Cold War simply continues, only colder. American defense spending stays at 5% of GDP through the entire 1990s. There is no peace dividend. The internet still happens, but it is born in two halves: a Western internet and a Soviet net behind a digital iron curtain. Yugoslavia in our timeline fell apart in 1991 because the Soviet shadow had lifted. In this new timeline, that shadow remains. Slobodan Milosevic's nationalist project never gains the same oxygen. The Yugoslav wars are smaller, contained, and Bosnia is spared the worst. 200,000 people who died in our world live in this one, but the Soviet grip on the Caucasus tightens. Chechnya never breaks free. The First and Second Chechen Wars never happen, but neither does Chechen autonomy. Without the Soviet collapse, Iran has a permanent counterweight to American power in the region. Tehran and Moscow grow closer. By the year 2000, Soviet engineers help Iran build a civilian nuclear program decades ahead of schedule. Iraq's Saddam Hussein, still a Soviet client, never invades Kuwait in 1990 because Moscow has the leverage to stop him. The Gulf War never happens. The American military presence in Saudi Arabia never begins. Osama bin Laden never finds his grievance. September 11, 2001 is just a Tuesday. The Twin Towers still stand. Al-Qaeda exists, but as a fringe Saudi dissident network with no global ambition. The Patriot Act is never written. The wars in Afghanistan and Iraq never happen. $4 trillion American dollars stay home. Tens of thousands of soldiers come home alive who, in our timeline, never came home at all. By 2010, the technology landscape looks alien. The Soviet Union, forced to compete, pours money into computing and biotech. There is no Silicon Valley monopoly. American big tech exists, but a parallel Soviet tech industry rises in Akadgorodok in Siberia. The first general-purpose AI is announced in 2023 by a Soviet research lab, not an American startup. Smartphones exist, but most of the world uses two of them, one for each side of the new digital wall. There is one strange upside. Without Chernobyl, the global anti-nuclear movement of the late 1980s never gains its biggest piece of evidence. Germany does not abandon nuclear power. France doubles down. By 2020, half of the world's electricity comes from nuclear plants instead of coal and gas. Global carbon emissions are 40% lower than in our timeline. The climate crisis still exists, but it arrives slower. The world has more time to fix it. But the price is paid in freedom. The Soviet Union, without its 18 billion ruble disaster, also never feels the pressure to release its grip. Dissidents are still arrested in 2026. The KGB never becomes the FSB, it just stays the KGB. Half of Europe lives under one-party rule into a third generation. China, watching the USSR survive, never reforms either. Tiananmen Square in 1989 ends in a much harder crackdown, because Beijing knows Moscow is still watching. So which world is better? A world without the Twin Towers attack, without the Iraq War, with nuclear power saving the climate, but where half of Europe is still locked behind a wall. Or our world, with all of its scars, its democracies, its open internet, and its slow, painful reckoning with the past. There is no clean answer. Every choice in history is a trade. In our timeline, the world owes everything it became after 1989 to a button that one tired Soviet operator pressed at 1:23 in the morning. 40 years on, almost to the day, the empty city of Pripyat is still there. The wolves have come back. The forests have grown over the apartment blocks. The reactor sits inside a steel tomb. And somewhere in another timeline, the lights are still on. If this video made you think, hit subscribe. The next Divergent Past is already loading.